Her true story from Alabama. My mother sold me to be abused until I gave birth to 14 babies for them. So I rebelled. My name is Velma Corbin, and I am 86 years old. People in this small Alabama town know me as the quiet old lady with the blue front porch and the silver curls. But what they don't know, what no one dares to imagine, is the hell I walked through just to still be standing. I wasn't always fragile. I wasn't always quiet. But when you've been sold by your own mother at 14, to a man 3 times your age, locked away on a farm for 20 years, forced to give birth to 14 children, most of whom you were never allowed to hold, you learn how to become silent, how to disappear, and how to survive. My mother, Letty, told me it was an opportunity. You'll be taken care of, she said, pinning up my hair like I was going to Sunday school. These folks, they need a girl like you. Clean, strong, obedient. I was just a child. I didn't understand why she cried when the black car pulled up. Why she shoved me toward the door with such urgency. Why she wouldn't meet my eyes when the man stepped out, Mr. Silas Reic. The man with a crooked cane and a thick southern drawl. He looked me over like I was livestock. Then he gave my mother an envelope and said, "She'll be our blessing." That was the last time I ever saw my mama smile. What happened after that can't fit into one breath. The farm was wide, fenced in and silent.
No neighbors. No phones.
No windows that open more than 3 inches. Just Mr. Silas, his wife Maeve, and a dark world behind closed doors. By the time I was 16, I had already buried my first child in the back garden. By 22, I delivered 8 babies, none of whom I named. They told me they were chosen by God, that I was doing the Lord's work. They called me a vessel, a duty, a good girl, and I stayed quiet, 'cause where could I go? Fast forward 60 years later. I'd escaped that world, started over, raised my last surviving daughter, Pearl, with every ounce of love I had left. I scrubbed floors, did night shifts at the factory, saved every penny. I gave her private school, new shoes, and birthday cakes with her name written in sugar. I thought maybe I had broken the curse. But then one summer afternoon, just last year, Pearl's voice changed. Her new husband, Curtis, stood tall behind her, arms crossed. "Mama, we need space," she said flatly. "It's time for you to move out." I blinked. "But this is my house, sweetheart." "It was," Curtis said. "We signed the refinancing in our name. It's ours now." I looked down at the paper in his hand. I'd signed it months ago, thinking it was a hospital form. "My eyesight isn't what it used to be." "You can stay for the weekend," Pearl added. "But after that, you're on your own." They shut the door behind them. Rain started to fall. It hit the roof like gravel. I sat on the edge of the porch swing with only my worn handbag and 2 pairs of socks in a Ziploc bag.
No coat. No umbrella.
No daughter. Just the weight of every betrayal I had survived, crashing down all over again. I thought I had escaped the past. But that day I realized I had only escaped the house, not the legacy. Pearl wasn't my salvation. She was my reflection. As I stood to leave the porch for the last time, a long black car pulled up on the gravel road. A window rolled down slowly. Inside was a woman in her 40s, staring at me with the same green eyes I once held as a baby in my arms. "Mama," she whispered, "do you remember me?" The past never forgets, and sometimes it drives straight up your gravel road. I froze. That voice, it hit me like a lightning bolt straight down my spine. Soft, unsure, but still familiar in a way I hadn't heard in decades. "Mama." I stepped off the porch slowly, my old knees trembling beneath me. The woman in the car had tears already falling down her cheeks. Her hair was long and dark, her face lined with quiet pain. But her eyes, those eyes were unmistakable. Green. Wide. Full of the questions no one ever let her ask. "Esther," I whispered. She nodded, pressing her hand against the window. "You remembered." Esther was my fifth child, born one cold February morning when I was just 19. I wasn't allowed to hold her, wasn't allowed to feed her. They took her from my arms within minutes and told me she was promised to a couple from Georgia. That was the last I ever saw of her. Until now. Jason, the young man driving, got out of the car and opened the back door. "Mrs. Corbin," he said gently, "I'm her son. Your grandson. We've been looking for you for years." I don't remember collapsing. Only the sensation of Esther's arms catching me before I hit the gravel. She held me like I had held Pearl, fiercely, as if making up for lost time in a single moment. "I thought you were gone," I whispered through my tears. "I thought you were dead." "I thought the same about you," she replied, "until I found documents. A letter Maeve wrote in a Bible she left behind when she passed. It named you, said you had survived, and that if I ever wanted to find the truth, I'd need to look in Alabama." We sat in a diner just outside town. Esther slid an envelope across the table, yellowed with time. Inside were copies of birth certificates, records, photos, even a grainy newspaper clipping with a headline, "Mysterious Disappearances on Reic Farm Spark Quiet Investigations." I nearly dropped my coffee. "I've found 6 others," Esther said. "Siblings. Half. Some adopted. Some not as lucky. But you have grandchildren, Mama. You have a whole tree you didn't know was growing." I couldn't speak. My throat burned. My hands shook. And then she leaned in. "But that's not all, Mama. Curtis and Pearl have no idea who they messed with." I looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" She took a breath. "Curtis works for a company that my husband is auditing. He's been moving money illegally through fake real estate deals." "And your house?" "It's one of them. He forged your name on multiple documents." She pulled out a flash drive. "And Pearl?" "She signed off on everyone." I sat back in my chair. Quiet. Broken. But not defeated. Not this time. That night, Esther took me to her home 2 towns over. It was small, warm, filled with photos and real laughter. Children ran through the halls. My grandchildren. One of them, a little girl named Ellie, looked up at me with those same green eyes and asked, "Are you the brave grandma?" I didn't know what to say, but something inside me clicked back into place. The next morning, Jason handed me a phone. "I've got a friend who works with elder justice cases," he said. "You ready to take your life back?" I looked out the window, back at Pearl's house, Curtis, at the lie they were still living, and I whispered, "I'm not just ready. I'm finally awake." When you've been silenced for decades, the first whisper of justice sounds like thunder in your chest. The call was short, direct. Jason's contact, Cheryl McBride, was a lawyer specializing in elder fraud and coercion. She'd helped over 30 women, grandmothers, war widows, retired schoolteachers, women like me who were tricked out of their homes by the very people they raised. "Mrs. Corbin," she said over speakerphone, "you're not alone. You're part of a very quiet epidemic. But you're also part of the fight now." I looked at Esther, who nodded gently. Her hand rested over mine. That was all I needed. "Then let's begin," I said. The first step was the paper trail. Curtis had forged my signature on 3 mortgage documents, used my house as collateral, and funneled the money into a renovation project that didn't exist. Pearl had co-signed everything. And the worst part? He'd convinced me to sign a power of attorney 4 months before. He said it was for medical emergencies. But in reality, he'd used it to take control of every asset I had left. My pension, my savings, even the deed. Cheryl's voice was firm. "We're going to reverse it all." And then? We pressed charges. But I didn't want just legal revenge. I wanted them to see me, to look me in the eye and realize who they'd tried to erase. That weekend, Esther drove me back into town. Not to Pearl's. Not yet. We went to the community center, where the annual Women's Day brunch was happening. Pearl was on stage. She was the guest speaker. "My mother taught me everything about sacrifice," she said into the microphone. "She showed me how to give without expecting anything in return." People clapped, smiled, nodded, and then I stepped through the doors. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Pearl froze on stage. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, she looked like a little girl again. Afraid, cornered, exposed. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Esther walked in behind me and handed a stack of papers to the event coordinator. They were copies of the fraudulent documents signed by Pearl and Curtis. The room fell silent. Pearl's voice cracked. "Mama, please. Not here." I stepped forward slowly, my cane clicking on the tile. "You had your platform," I said calmly. "This is mine." I turned to the crowd. "My name is Velma Corbin. I raised a daughter I loved with everything I had. I thought I broke the cycle. I thought I gave her more than I ever received. But love without boundaries isn't sacrifice. It's self-destruction. She took my name, my home, my dignity, and I'm here to take them all back." I walked out before she could respond. Outside, Jason was waiting. He handed me an envelope. "You've officially regained control of your assets. The deed is yours again." Later that night, Pearl called. "Why did you have to do it like that?" She said, her voice shaking. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "Good," I replied. "Because pain teaches when love can't." But the story wasn't over yet. That same night, Jason discovered a second property purchased under my name, without my knowledge. An abandoned building on the outskirts of town. And what was hidden inside that building would uncover the darkest truth about what Curtis was really planning. Sometimes the deepest betrayal isn't what they took from you. It's what they plan to bury you with. The abandoned building sat on the edge of Monroe County, camouflaged by overgrown weeds and rusted fencing. From the outside, it looked like an old feed store or maybe a forgotten factory. But the paperwork said otherwise. Curtis had purchased the property using my name, claiming it was going to be a care facility for senior women. I laughed when Jason told me that. Care facility? I had spent 60 years locked on a farm being bred like cattle. And now Curtis wanted to build a prison for women like me? Jason parked just outside the gate. "Are you sure you want to go in?" he asked. I stepped out slowly, bracing myself on my cane. "I've lived through worse than broken windows and ghosts, son." "Open the door." The air inside was thick, dusty, stale, and cold. The floorboards groaned beneath our feet. The ceiling panels sagged. But the real horror was what we found in the back room. Old twin beds lined the walls, still wrapped in plastic. Steel bars had been welded into the window frames. Cameras, real cameras, hung in the corners, wired and active. And in the center of the room sat a file cabinet, labeled Reform Room Blueprint Phase 2. Jason's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside were detailed plans for turning the building into a disciplinary housing facility for unruly senior dependents. Curtis had filed it as a pilot program, funded by false grants and fake donations under my name. Unruly senior dependents. That was me. Tears burned in my eyes, not out of sadness but fury. "He wasn't just trying to steal your house," Jason whispered. "He was trying to disappear you again." And just like that, I wasn't tired anymore. Esther and I returned to the house that night. I sat at her kitchen table, sifting through files, documents, and every shred of paper tied to my name. Jason was on the phone with Cheryl. "We've got enough for criminal fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, identity theft, and intent to unlawfully detain a senior citizen." Cheryl said, "Good. Because I'm filing it all first thing Monday morning." Pearl showed up at my doorstep the next day.
No makeup. No heels.
Just her and a hollow voice. "I didn't know about the building," she whispered. I swear it. Curtis said it was for tax write-offs. I didn't read everything. That's the problem, Pearl, I said calmly. You never read the fine print. You just signed off on my life like it was a receipt. She started to cry. I didn't mean to become her. My heart ached because I knew exactly who she meant, Letty. My mother. The woman who sold me. And I had tried so hard to do better. To be better. But we don't break generational curses by pretending they don't exist. We break them by facing the mirror, even if it shows something ugly. Pearl dropped a key onto the table. It's yours again. Everything. I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't say a word. Sorry, can't unbuild cages. That night, Jason knocked gently on my door. We just received a federal notice, he said, holding an envelope. Curtis has fled the state. But he didn't get far. Inside the envelope was a warrant for his arrest. And a court date. And this time I'd be the one taking the stand. For the first time in my life, I wasn't standing in front of a man with power. I was standing in front of the law. And this time it was on my side. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and fear. I had worn my best blouse. The pale blue one Clark used to say matched my eyes. Jason stood beside me in a dark gray suit. Esther sat in the front row, her hand clutching mine tightly before I walked to the witness stand. It wasn't just a court case. It was my testimony to the world that I would not die erased. Curtis was finally caught at a hotel in Mississippi, trying to skip town with a briefcase of cash and 3 phones. They brought him in cuffed, arrogant as ever. He winked when he saw me, but I didn't flinch. Because this time, I wasn't the scared 14-year-old girl my mama had sold off. I was Velma Corbin, a survivor, a mother, and now a witness. The prosecutor laid it all out. Fraudulent financial records. Forged documents. Use of elder power of attorney to seize assets. Identity theft. Intent to establish an unlawful detainment facility targeting vulnerable seniors. And when it was my turn to speak, I stood tall. My cane leaned beside me, but I didn't use it to steady my voice. I was raised to believe silence was safety, I said slowly. But silence nearly buried me. I was sold at 14. Gave birth to 14 babies in secret. Spent decades pretending I was fine. Then I gave my daughter everything. And she let a man take it all. I came here today not just to reclaim what was mine, but to make sure no woman after me ever lives invisible again. Pearl sat silently behind Curtis, sobbing into her hands. She didn't try to defend him. Not anymore. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Honorable May Lattimore, reviewed the file for nearly 10 minutes before speaking. Then she looked up, stared directly at Curtis, and said, "Mr. Danvers, you didn't just commit fraud. You exploited trust. You weaponized love. And you nearly stole a legacy from someone who already had everything taken from her once. This court finds you guilty on all charges." The gavel hit the bench. The courtroom erupted. I didn't cry. I just breathed, a breath I hadn't taken in over 70 years. One that felt full, real, whole. After the sentencing, Pearl approached me outside the courtroom. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to start over. Maybe work with Esther. Help the other women. Can I do that?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I was angry, but because I had finally learned the difference between love and enabling. "Your healing," I told her, "is yours to chase, not mine to grant." And I walked away. Back at Esther's home that night, the porch was full of candles, rocking chairs, and voices. Some of my long-lost children had gathered. Some were still scared. Some still hurt. But we were together. Not because we were healed, but because we were finally safe enough to begin. That night, Esther handed me a newspaper. Front page headline, "From Survivor to Savior. 86-year-old Alabama woman helped shut down multi-state elder abuse scheme. And beneath it, an invitation. A congressional hearing on elder exploitation. They wanted me to speak. Some women grow old in silence. Some grow old in shame. But some? They grow old and they speak. Washington, D.C. was colder than I expected. I had never been on a plane before. Never worn a microphone clipped to my shirt. Never had my name printed on a place card and sat at a table with U.S. senators watching. But there I was, Velma Corbin, 86 years old, standing before the Congressional Committee on Elder Rights and Protections. The chamber was silent as I walked to the microphone, cane in hand but back straight. I took a breath and then I spoke. My name is Velma Corbin. I was sold by my mother at 14 years old to a man who used my body to bring 14 children into the world, none of whom I was allowed to raise. I escaped. I rebuilt. And then in my old age, my own daughter and her husband nearly took everything from me. My house, my savings, even my name. This is what elder abuse looks like in America. It's not always bruises or nursing homes. Sometimes it looks like your own blood smiling, while they sign away your life behind your back. One senator wiped her eyes. Another leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. When I finished, there was silence for a long time, and then a standing ovation. That day, the committee passed the motion for a new bill, the Corbin Reform Act, a federal policy that would create tighter protections for seniors against financial exploitation by family members or caregivers. I didn't cry. But inside, a 14-year-old girl finally smiled. Back in Alabama, things began to shift. The old Reic farm, where I'd spent my lost years, was torn down. Esther had petitioned to turn the land into a restoration sanctuary, a home for women over 60 who had survived abuse but had nowhere to go. She called it Velma House. I nearly collapsed when I saw the sign go up. Jason started giving free legal clinics across the region, teaching the elderly how to protect their assets. Pearl. She took a job scrubbing floors at the new home. I didn't ask her to. She just showed up one morning with gloves and bleach and said, "If I can't erase what I did, I'll start cleaning what you saved." And then one Sunday afternoon, something happened I never expected. A letter.
No stamp.
No return address. Just dropped on my porch. Inside was a single page. I was wrong. I was afraid. I should have protected you instead of selling you. I hope God has mercy. Letty. My mother. Dead now for decades. But even the dead sometimes want forgiveness. I sat on my porch with that letter for a long while. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't rush. I just let myself feel. Not anger. Not pain. Just freedom. That night, Esther walked out onto the porch and whispered, "There's someone here to see you." I turned, and standing by the gate was a tall man in his 50s. His hands were shaking. He took off his cap slowly and said, "Mama, I think I'm your son." When you've lost count of the children taken from you, one voice calling you Mama can undo the silence of a lifetime. He stood there trembling, cap in hand, like a child afraid to be told he'd knocked on the wrong door. But I knew. The shape of his face. The narrow slope of his nose. His deep-set eyes, they were Clark's. "What's your name?" I asked, barely breathing. He cleared his throat, voice raw. "They called me Jacob, but my birth certificate says Silas Corbin. Born June 1972. My knees nearly gave out. Silas. My last son. The one born just before I escaped that hell. The one I hid in a laundry basket and handed off to a friend of Maeve's, just so he wouldn't be raised as their next product. I had believed I'd never see him again. Esther stepped back and gave us space. Silas walked slowly across the gravel path, like each step was asking permission. When he reached the porch, I reached out my hand. He took it like a lifeline. And then we both cried. Quietly, like people who'd spent their whole lives swallowing grief. We sat on the porch for hours. I listened as he told me how he'd grown up in a church-run foster system, bounced from home to home. Never adopted. Never loved right. But he made it. Became a mechanic. Had 2 daughters of his own. I didn't know who I was, he said. Until last week. I sent for my records. And I found your name, Velma. I Googled it. And when I saw you, at that hearing, I knew. I held his hand the whole time. You were never lost to me, I whispered. Just out of reach. That night, my porch was full. Me, Esther, Silas, Jason, grandkids and great-grandkids running around, eating cobbler and chasing fireflies like the world hadn't almost broken us all. We were a family stitched back together by pain, but held together by choice. The next day, the mayor of our little town stopped by. She brought a plaque. It read, Velma Corbin Day, for bravery, survival, and restoration. I hung it above my fireplace, but not for me. For every woman who had ever been silenced, locked away, written off, or thrown out when they were too old to be useful. This house, this home was theirs now too. Pearl came to visit the next Sunday. She brought flowers and a box of letters. From the women you helped, she said. They wanted to thank you. We sat in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes silence is peace. I looked at my daughter, not as the girl I raised, not as the woman who betrayed me, but as the woman who was trying. And I said the one thing I hadn't said in years. I forgive you. She cried. And this time I held her. Not to fix her. Not to change her. But to free her. Later that night, Jason came running up the porch steps, phone in hand. Velma, he said breathless. CNN just called. They want to interview you. On national television. I blinked. Me? And then I smiled. Let the whole world hear it. If I survived it, so can they. Some people spend a lifetime surviving. Others spend it hiding. But a few, they rise up and tell their truth, so no one else has to hide again. The CNN crew arrived early that morning. Bright lights, cameras, microphones. It all felt so unreal, like something that belonged to someone else's life. But this time it was mine. They set up in my living room. The same room where I once sat with nothing but a bag of socks and betrayal. Now it was full of life. Photos on the walls, grandkids' drawings on the fridge, flowers blooming by the window. The interviewer, a kind woman named Renee, asked, Velma, when did you first know that this wasn't just your story, but a voice for so many others? I didn't blink. Didn't hesitate. The moment I was thrown into the rain with nothing, and still heard a voice call me Mama. That's when I knew I had more than memory. I had legacy. The interview went viral. Within days, letters poured in from all over the country. Elderly women, middle-aged daughters, even men who grew up in homes where silence was the rule. They wrote, You told my story when I couldn't. I thought I was alone until you spoke. Because of you, I told my children no, and meant it. We started a foundation, the Second Name Project, providing legal support, housing, and emotional care to exploited seniors. Esther ran the board. Jason handled the legal aid. Pearl managed daily operations, humble, quiet, but full of purpose. And me? I wrote. I spoke. I traveled to places where women whispered instead of screamed, and I helped them find their voice. One afternoon, I visited the graveyard on the edge of town. I brought 2 flowers. One for my husband, Clark, the only man who ever tried to love me free. The other, for my mother, Letty. I laid them down side by side. I don't understand you, I whispered. But I release you. What you did broke me. But what I did with the breaking healed generations. Back at Velma House, a new resident arrived. Her name was Martha, 73. Cried when we told her she had her own room. She kept whispering, "I thought I'd die alone." I tucked her in with one of my handmade quilts and told her, "Not anymore. You've been found, and we've been waiting for you." That night, Silas sat beside me on the porch. "You ever think about the babies you didn't get to raise?" he asked gently. I looked at the stars above. "All the time. But I don't cry for them anymore," I said. "I fight for the ones still here. And the ones who'll never have to know the things I did." CNN replayed my clip 1 year later. Esther called me into the living room beaming. "They're giving you a national award." I didn't move. Just sat quietly, watching the screen as the anchor spoke. Velma Corbin, survivor, mother, fighter, and founder of the Second Name Project, has changed the lives of thousands. The screen cut to my face, smiling under the porch light. Not bitter. Not broken. Just free. Speech balloon. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment below. Like it. Share it. Subscribe for more real stories that inspire and empower. And remember, no matter what they took from you, you still own your name. And your voice can change the world.